An interesting new study was conducted where they found out that 60% of people in Britain believe in one conspiracy theory or another. Now, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things to talk about here. I mean, first of all, being the fact that, when we're talking about conspiracy theories, immediately we get into what has always been a term used to sort of just brush things under the rug. Oh, these people don't believe in anything that the mainstream believes in. They believe in these conspiracy theories, which is pretty crazy. The term is just as ridiculous as fake news, where the only people, guilty of committing fake news are independent media. There's no possible way that mainstream media could commit fake news, even though they've been guilty of it time and time again. So here you got buzzword conspiracy theory and what they're about to go into in this study, which is the first time that any academics have ever actually looked into. I mean, even according to and admittedly in this study, this is the first time that they've actually looked at how, these conspiracy theories affect, social trust and what goes on, why people believe these things, how it affects, society, all that sort of stuff. And this is also the largest conspiracy theory study that has ever been conducted. It was the University of Cambridge and YouGov that was involved in doing this study, and it was funded by the Leverhulme Trust. So really interesting findings here, because sort of the way that they put this together was, they looked at Brexit voters versus non-Brexit voters, and they looked at people who voted for Hillary or support Hillary versus people who supported Trump, and then they looked at the various issues or the various beliefs these people had and tried to deduce some sort of thing or another. Interestingly, I mean, just to preface this as we go into it, it's always been sort of touted that less educated or dumb people voted for Trump and more educated, intelligent people voted for Hillary. Now, the interesting side to this is that is based on the very fact that when they look at the average Trump supporter, they pick a certain type of individual that, is kind of maybe perhaps they're Southern, maybe perhaps they're extreme, maybe perhaps they're more into white culture and being a white supremacist and stuff like that, which is what really the media tries to push as a narrative and a character. Whereas they look at, the Hillary supporter as that more well-dressed, put together, I'm a smart individual, I'm educated, I know what I'm doing. I would never think along the lines of this sort of stuff. So you look at the two, and then you start looking at the information here, and you start to see how the information here lines up with the narrative they're trying to create, but that narrative is not actually accurate. And I'll explain that in a second. So one of the first things here, I mean, if we go one by one and we start looking at it, 15% of the Brexit voters that wanted to leave and 11% of the ones that wanted to stay believed that regardless of who's in charge of the government, there was a secret cabal of people that were actually running things. So, that's interesting because it's roughly the same in both sides. It's a little smaller than I had actually thought. I mean, 15 and 11% shows, there's people who are informed and they're questioning things, but perhaps not quite as much as you'd expect at this moment. The most widespread conspiracy belief that they called it belief that they found existed in the UK was shared by 44% of people, and it was that even though we call the country a democracy, there are actually just a very few group of people who actually run the country. So instead of looking at it as a cabal that kind of is in control of all events, there's a good chunk of people believe that the government doesn't really run the country. Pretty much half the people agree that the government doesn't run the country, and it doesn't matter who we vote into power. Now that's inspiring because that shows us that 50% of people pretty well are informed enough to understand how things actually work, which is great. I'd be very curious to see what would happen if they did this in the United States. With the amount of people voting there, especially this midterm election, it would be interesting to see what kind of number would come up there. Mistrust in authority within, this is again still talking about the UK, was very high. 77% of people do not trust journalists at all or very, very little. And 76% of them do not trust the government ministers, and 74% of them do not trust company or big company bosses. So this is interesting because why is this mistrust there? You know, mainstream media will have you believe that it's the result of, independent media and fake news running wild on social media, changing the minds of people, making it so that they don't trust what's going on. What they do not want to take responsibility for is the very fact that for decades now, politicians have been lying to people constantly, and nothing changes and nothing gets better, as we like to call it. Not only that, but mainstream media time and time and time again, year after year after year, is just lying to people. It is falling into narratives, and people are starting to figure this out. And then you have journalists that are not being trusted. Well, of course, because everyone is finding out that journalists are told what to do and what not to do. And if they do something that's outside the box, those in charge of the overall media station are going to pull it back anyway, and they're not going to be allowed to do what they need to do. So it goes to this whole narrative of you have what's going on with Facebook where, they're trying to shut off all these independent media voices like Collective Evolution. Meanwhile, people don't even trust mainstream media at all. And yet that's all Facebook is pushing for, is more mainstream media and mainstream voices, which people are very evidently saying, we don't trust it. So why are you giving it to us? Interesting question. Interestingly enough, 47% of the Leave voters in the UK and 44% of Trump voters in the US believe that the government is deliberately trying to hide the truth about how many immigrants are in their country, which is interesting because obviously those two countries having a lot to do with immigration over the past couple of years. And, given how much it's in the media and how polarized this entire situation is, it's not surprising that people would be feeling like they're misinformed, which they probably are given what we're seeing in the media for the most part. Another interesting one was in anti-vaccination, and this is where we start talking about the whole question of the narrative they're trying to create about who the Trump voter is or who the Brexit voter is, right? So the person who wants to leave in the Brexit situation. First of all, they call it anti-vax, and I love this because it's like everybody who questions vaccinations. So you could sit there and be like, hi, doctor, I was wondering why, I have this question about what's in vaccinations, and I'm wondering is it really safe? What data do you have on that? Suddenly you're an anti-vaxxer. I mean, this is a classic thing that's going on in the mainstream media right now. But if we actually look at it, 13% of Brexit voters who wanted to leave they're questioning vaccinations. They don't really believe the whole story. 25% of Trump voters also question the whole vaccine story. Whereas when it comes to Clinton voters, and when it comes to those who are remaining with the whole Brexit situation, it's 5% for the remain in Brexit and 9% for the Clinton voters. When it comes to global warming being a hoax, which is the idea that man-made global warming is a hoax and it's invented to deceive people. Now, this is a loaded topic on its own because right away you start to realize that how many times over the years has the narrative around climate change and global warming completely changed and shifted? I remember I was writing about this and researching this so deeply starting about 10 years ago, where I found out very quickly there's something going on with this situation. The data doesn't match up. There's people lying. This is very clear. Yes, we're seeing things going on out in our world that we got to question, but why is there also a whole bunch of stuff over here showing that it's part of a cyclical thing that's going on, and how much can we really attribute to man-made global warming or man-made climate change when we don't really even understand what's happening to begin with entirely? So when you start to look at it, you start to say, well, those people, and this is from my research, and I'm going to lay out my opinion here, and this opinion is shared by unbeknownst to what the mainstream media will tell you, which is complete and utter horseshit. The majority of people that are credible in the space of environmental studies and in the space of science looking at climate change do not support the official story. They don't. If you actually do the research, you will find that a lot of credible people do not believe in the man-made global warming narrative that's being passed around. Now, is the planet warming in certain areas? Yes. Is there climate change happening as a result of human interaction? We don't really know exactly what that looks like yet because there's cyclical patterns that are happening like crazy. What we do know, beyond any reasonable doubt, is we are polluting this planet like crazy when it comes to dirtying the air, when it comes to dirtying the oceans, when it comes to destroying wildlife and destroying forests and all that sort of stuff. This is the conversation that we should be having. But we're not. We're talking about CO2, because CO2 is a giant distraction that involves being able to tax the shit out of people. And that's why that conversation is happening. So when we come into global warming here, and you wonder why people are questioning it. So Brexit voters who wanted to leave, 12% of them don't believe the official story versus 2 who don't believe it in the Remain side. And then you have 47% of Trump voters don't believe the official story versus 2% of Clinton voters who don't believe the official story. Meaning what this is looking at is that 47% of Trump voters are actually more informed on the issue, whereas 2% of Clinton voters are informed on the issue. So going back to this, when we were talking about the narratives of the type of people, what the mainstream media is promoting here is be someone who does not question anything. We don't want you to question anything. You're bad if you align with leaving Brexit. You're bad if you align with Trump. Right? Because this is what they're trying to do, right? They're creating this story of like, these people are stupid over here and these people are intelligent over here. Intelligent people just do what they're told. They don't question narratives. They just kind of go along with things, right? So you start to see all of this stuff. I mean, when it comes to conspiracy skepticism, so people who believe that none of these conspiracies are true and it's all just, made up in people's minds. So when we're looking at none of these are true, okay? So Brexit people who wanted to leave, it's 29%. So only a small percentage of the people who wanted to leave believe no conspiracies are true. Whereas when it came to the people who wanted to stay, 51% of them think no conspiracies are true. So more than half of the people are completely misinformed about what's going on in the world. When it comes to Trump voters, only 16% believe that none of these conspiracy theories are true. Whereas Clinton voters, 50% of people are saying, we have no idea what is going on in the world. And this is fascinating to look at, because when you start to realize and analyze the fact that the media is trying to create a specific narrative and they're trying to pit sides against one another, what we really need to look at is scratch all that crap for a second and say, how informed are we as a people? How informed are we as a citizen? And are we really looking past what's going on? Why is there a battle happening where you start to look at Trump calling out so much of what's going on in media, or you start to look at a lot of big figures? It's not just Trump. Tons of big influential figures are saying, yeah, I don't trust the media. And they've been saying it for years, because the media sides with politicians, because the media is owned and run by a cabal, a deep state, who most people here are starting to realize exists, right? And they are influencing so that you can have studies that work this way, right? To me, what this study reveals is that still about 50% of people that are out there voting and making decisions have absolutely no idea what is going on in the world, which is very, very interesting, because when you look at collective consciousness, you start to realize that still more than half of the population is uploading the understanding, the idea, the consciousness to the overall collective consciousness that, yeah, things are just what they are. This is just how it is, and I believe everything I'm saying from the media and all that sort of stuff, which means, yeah, we're making some progress here. People are starting to shift, they're starting to change, but there's a long ways to go still, right? We still have to do a lot of work to understand ourselves and to understand what's truly going on in the world, and look at it in a way where we're not just, being super skeptical about everything and saying, oh, I don't believe any of this stuff, it's ridiculous, but instead being able to say, hey, what's actually going on here? So to me, this is a fascinating study. It's interesting the way that it's covered, even the featured images featuring aliens, and they go in the whole anti-vax thing, and they go into all the sort of the big ones that makes it really easy to make fun of people about, when in reality, you're starting to see that a lot of people are questioning things, and it's important. And I think what's going on with a lot of the big issues, global warming, when it talks about vaccinations, when it talks about who's really running our governments and who's really running our world, people are starting to really pick up on what's going on. And this is huge, because guess what? It is based on evidence. The evidence is there. And when 70% of the people don't trust the mainstream media, you got to think that, yeah, 77% of those people are going to question what the mainstream media says now. There's still years of programming that has to diminish before they start to really realize what's totally going on here, which comes to the importance of conscious media and what we're doing. It's like, we're not only going to look at it from what's actually going on, but we're going to dissect this left-right paradigm, throw it out the window, say who gives a crap about this kind of stuff, and let's look at who we are as humans and how we can really bring this thing together as a collective, because that's really what this is about, is us shifting our consciousness so we have a better line of sight as to what's actually happening in our world, so that we change the collective consciousness such that it's not projecting the same world we see today. It's going to project a world that reflects our heart-based consciousness, which is what we're working towards creating here with the type of media that we're doing, which is why we're saying if you enjoy this media, if you support this media, help us combat, in a sense, a lot of what's happening on Facebook, a lot of what's happening out there with the censorship of this stuff, and become a supporter of our Conscious Media Movement campaign, because you're seeing people don't trust it. Where are they going to go? Well, the only people getting favored voices right now is still mainstream media, who people don't trust anyway. So we got to come together and we got to lift up conscious media and say, look, this is where it could be. This is where it's at. Here's where we're going to get the truth. But not only that, we're going to be able to explore ourselves so that we can actually change the challenges that we're facing here and not just repeat the same cycle over and over again. Thanks for checking in with this one. That's it. That's all. Hey YouTube, thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and share a comment if you have anything to say. You can also subscribe to our channel just above my head up here so you can get more videos like this. Collective Evolution stays alive in this era of massive censorship through support from viewers like you. Up in the right-hand corner of the screen, you can join our Conscious Media Movement campaign, which allows you to become a monthly supporter and help keep conscious media and Collective Evolution alive. Thanks and peace.